Good morning, Render Atlanta. Oh, give me one more. Good morning, Render Atlanta. Thank you so much. So as the amazing host mentioned, my name is Kristina Dixon. I'm the Director of Partnerships here at Render Atlanta. Very excited to have you. Also very excited to have Ms. Jasmine Crowe, the CEO and founder of Goodr, up here on the stage. I believe there's no better way to start the morning than talking about a black woman trying to save the world.
Yes.
So that's a blessing.
That is a blessing.
Ain't that right, girl? So before we get started, we already gave the introduction to Jasmine, but I really wanted to dive into your TED Talk. So I was looking at your website, of course, and you were talking about how food drives do not solve hunger. And at first I was like, girl, how? How does it not solve hunger? But after listening to your mission, it made sense. So I would love for you to give the audience just a brief overview of what makes Goodr different and what do you mean by food drives are not really like the only solve here?
Yeah, well, thank you again. I'm super excited to be here. We were just talking about the first time I spoke at RenderATL, which was at the Gathering Spot 2 years ago. So congratulations just on the growth. I just love that, and I'm
Thank you.
really rooting for you guys to be even bigger and outgrow this place next year. So
Thank you so much.
when I talked in that TED Talk about food drives not solving hunger, it was a real experience. I was volunteering here in South Side of Atlanta at a friend of mine's nonprofit, and we're still really good friends today, so he lets me tell this story. But he was receiving food donations from the food bank, and they were giving away, I'll never forget, it was like kettle potato chips, these superhero-shaped macaroni noodles. It was a gallon of Sonny's barbecue sauce, like a whole little gallon, looked like a milk gallon of Sonny's barbecue sauce. There were some low-fat, like Weight Watchers ding-dongs, some Belvita breakfast bars, and like a couple of like random, like a can of asparagus, a mini can of corn, and like those French fried green onions that you put on like green bean casserole at Thanksgiving. And that's what we were giving people. Like there was no meat, there was no produce, and there was about 80 people in line. And so as we're putting these bags together, all I kept thinking is like, what meals are these people gonna make from what we're giving them? And that's when I realized that in this country, there's a big difference between access to food and access to meals. And so how Goodr is different is, every time someone interacts with us, we are guaranteeing that they're gonna leave with 7 to 10 days worth of meals for their families. And that's really different because we all know that the root cause of hunger is actually poverty. And if you are not able to afford food, what you've gotta be able to do is budget and plan food accordingly for your lifestyle. And if you can say, for 10 days, for a third of the month, because of Goodr, I now have access to food. That money can now go to you paying your bills on time, to buying prescriptions, to putting gas in your car, as opposed to having to live in the vicious cycle that food banks have created over the last 50 years, where you go to this food pantry for bread and other items. You got to go here to try and get meat on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You're going here to get produce. So you're in this cycle of constantly needing as opposed to just receiving. And that's what we do differently at Goodr.
Okay, well, that was a beautiful introduction. So before we really dive into it, I just want to highlight what the title of this conversation will be. So the title of this conversation is Technology as a Catalyst for Behavioral Change. What we will dive into is to how is Goodr, changing the world when it comes to recycling, when it comes to food sustainability. We want to go straight into question number 1. Let me get my handy dandy iPad. So the questions that we're going to focus on is, how does Goodr leverage technology to inspire behavioral changes amongst businesses and individuals regarding food waste reduction, sustainability practices, and hunger solutions? You gave us a really good brief introduction. How does Goodr effectively utilize technology to address food waste reduction and sustainability practices? I'll let you dive into the tech part behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times, to think how we got to become a tech-enabled company is really just the emergence of food delivery apps. And if you guys will go back 2016, when food delivery apps were starting to really hit the scene. So this could be your Grubhubs, your DoorDashes, your Uber Eats, and we were sending out referral codes. And I would get referral codes from like 3 or 4 friends, probably a week, like use this code, get $10 off your first meal. And when I first started to have the idea about Goodr, of course, everyone told me I was crazy, it would never work, but I was I thought that there could be a use of technology almost in reverse, like when these businesses had excess food. At that time, I had learned about food waste. I saw that we were wasting, just so everybody knows, about 72 to 80 billion pounds of food every year goes to waste in this country. And so a way to think about that is the Mercedes-Benz Stadium full to the top 2 or 3 times a day with perfectly good food. So that's how much food we're wasting. And so I thought we could create an app that would almost work in reverse. When people have excess food, they click on the items, request a pickup, we go and get that food picked up and then delivered to a local nonprofit. And before I ever had the technology, so all of 2017 and most of 2018, I was really doing that via text. So I would work with like local chefs, and Turner Broadcasting Systems at the time was the first to give me a chance. And Chef Ryan would send me a text message and say, Jasmine, I'm gonna have food tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And I would go and I would pick it up and I would take it to the nonprofit. I would take a picture, I would send that back to him, and then I would bring supplies with me every time I picked up his donations. And when I started thinking what the technology would have, the biggest thing I started to see is he was sending me a list of what he was donating, and it was constantly like the same thing. And one of the things he was always donating was pork. It was always like a full pan of pulled pork. And what we didn't realize was that at the time, people were making behavioral changes around what they were eating. More people were going vegan, more people were giving up meat. And so if he hadn't, saw the data in what he was actually donating, he would have continuously produced things. I thought that was my kid. That's so funny. I was like, did I bring her? He would have continuously kept producing something that was going to waste. And so that's what the technology actually does, is it shows the businesses for the first time what it is that they're wasting on a continuous basis so that they can make better production decisions and actually go to the EPA's first hierarchy on food waste, which is source reduction, like stop overproducing so much food in the first place. We also actually equate every pound that they keep out of landfill to CO2 emissions, which really helps them improve their carbon footprint. So we could tell them, this is how many pounds of carbon that you've helped from being emitted into the environment by getting this food donated and not going into landfill. We also give them a lot of data around their community impact, so which nonprofits and organizations and causes that they're supporting, whether that is, we donate to safe houses, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, churches, so they can kind of see a greater landscape of who they're serving, how many meals they're providing. So that's really what the technology does. It's data, but it's also really like enriching and showing them how they are being a good neighbor.
I love that. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar. So this year I did bring in Goodr in order to recycle all of our food waste at the conference as well. So very excited about that. Thank you. You talked about the data analytics, and that's something that I saw, like the dashboard that you have created to literally give us a visual of the impact that we're making. I know that when we talk about dashboard, we talk about financial impact, CEOs always want to see the bottom line. So when you're thinking about technology and what that looks like, how are you utilizing that to show the value to these larger corporations? Because I know you got some amazing partnerships. You partner with the NFL, I believe. You partner with a few people. How are you using technology in order to show them, hey, this is actually not just for being a good person, this is, going to improve your operation?
Yeah, it's really all about the ROI. And for a lot of our customers, they're seeing a 4X to 10X ROI with us. And so the reason why is because, it is kind of crazy. Right. They actually can get tax deductions for their food donations. And so that's another thing that our platform shows them. And before, we always say you can't manage what you don't measure. And so if you are just always throwing everything in the trash, you're really throwing money away. And so what we're able to show you is you have 100 pizzas to donate today. Those pizzas cost you $3 each to make. The way that you're able to get the tax deductions through the government is you have to have true tracking of what you're donating, and that's what our platform does. It tracks it, but then we also give them the value of the donation. So when the nonprofit receives it, they actually sign for it like they would a UPS package, and that signature automatically generates a donation letter into our client's portal. So now they see on, what's today? June 1st? Yeah, Thursday, June 1st, I donated 100 pizzas to Atlanta Mission and the tax deduction is $400 or whatever it is, and now they have a record of it, and usually the pickup cost for us is a fraction of what they're actually getting back in a donation. So that's where they're able to see. So that's another thing they see in the dashboard, and it's really easy around tax time because we just really went through it with corporate taxes in the May month. It's really easy for them just to be able to download it and then really have that record of proof of exactly where this food went and have those letters to back it up and see exactly everything that they're donating.
Oh, child, I know making taxes easier is always better for everybody.
I wish I could do it for myself.
Amen. So the next question I want to dive into, so we talked about the benefit of technology and helping your company out. I kind of want to flip it and say, to talk about the challenges that you have with technology and how, we have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of designers. Are you facing any challenges when it comes to growing your platform when using technology?
I think the biggest challenge that we face with technology is that it's really expensive. And so when we were building the company, I mean, I went through so many ebbs and flows with technology early on. I remember when I was first starting, I'm a solo founder, so no one helped me create this company. This was really a true idea. And I remember everyone was like, oh, you got to have a co-founder. And I basically was on the corner with a sign I need a co-founder, a CTO. And I actually remember Justin Dawkins, who at the time was with Goody Nation, now he's with Collab Capital. I had kind of brought on a CTO, and it was from let's say June through November, and I had not seen anything happening other than a splash page of a website. And I remember asking Justin how will I know that they're building? How will I know? And he was like, they should have a repository. No one is ever building something and not saving it up. And even if you can't read code, you should be having a GitHub and see what's going on. And that was early learning for me because that wasn't happening. And I remember when I went back and I approached them, they were like, oh, my build environment crashed and I lost everything. It just was basically they weren't building anything. So that was an early challenge, and 6 months or so just lost. That I think a lot of non-technical founders would have that same problem. And had I not known someone and just been honest to ask the question hey, I haven't seen anything, am I tripping? Is this usually how long it takes? I would have probably spent another 6 months to a year with that person and had nothing from it. Yeah, so I think then, we've worked with some overseas teams. Now we've really started to bring it in-house. And it's just the deadlines sometimes are always off. This sprint's gonna take us 2 weeks, and it's a month, and it's just, so that I think those are sometimes the challenges that we have. Another big challenge that we have is turnover in the marketplace. So who we sell to is really, really high up. So we may sell to a vice president of sustainability for all the Dunkin' Donuts or Chick-fil-A's across the country, but our user is someone that actually is an hourly employee at Dunkin' Donuts or Chick-fil-A, and they're constantly changing. So it's constantly our customer success team has to really monitor the adoption rates, how often they're using it, and we start to see okay, they haven't placed a pickup this week, and now we know it's a whole new kitchen manager, it's a shift manager. So it's constantly making sure that our technology is sending notifications. We're doing a lot of praising. We're trying to do more gamification to show people how they're stacking up against other, Dunkin' Donuts in their region and, other companies. But I think it's just that can sometimes be a challenge because food service, which is where we are, is probably one of the biggest turnovers in the country. I think and I feel bad because when I was a waitress and a bartender, if I had a bad day, I'd be I'm just quitting. And I would just, because there was always another restaurant to go to, and now I'm why don't these people stay? And I was part of that problem.
That is hilarious. I used to always tell people, I got a mama, I don't need this job, so I get it. So
I couldn't say that. My mom was like, you need to work.
We talked about a lot of technology and how it plays a role in your company and in your life. We briefly talked in our conversation about the SDG goals. I would love to give visibility or give understanding of what those are and how that's impacting your company, and what do you see there as a CEO in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, SDG goals are really kind of the driving force around what I think makes Goodr sell. Yeah. Because so many companies have set these really ambitious goals, and we've seen them. I remember not this past year, but the year before, Super Bowl, which how much is the Super Bowl commercial? a couple million for 30 seconds or something, but I felt like Google at the time, Microsoft at the time, all their commercials, Amazon as well, were like, we're investing $100 million into climate change. We're going to be carbon neutral. We're going to be, zero waste. If you look at Marriott's website, Hyatt, I mean, just any company, you go to their sustainability page, they're all talking about cutting waste in half by 50% by 2025. And the reality is we're so far behind. We haven't started. When you think of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, we are less than 7 years away from that and worlds behind. Like those should probably be 2070 goals, like based off of how far we are. But because people have set those goals, that is a good opportunity for us to go in and help them reach it. And food waste, actually, Project Drawdown, which is, they monitor pretty much what's happening with climate change all over the world. And last year they said that food waste, reducing food waste, was the number 2 thing we could do next to fixing our energy grid, which is clearly a big issue, is the number 2 thing we could do to combat climate change.
I love that.
So it's like, it's a big problem, but we still have a lot of people that are wasting food. So had you guys not partnered with us, you all would have been part of, you would have seen that. You would have been part of the problem. And we've all been there. We've all been to like a wedding, an event, and you see all this extra food and you're just wondering like what's going to happen to it. Well, it ends up in landfill. And it's not only just an issue from the environment, but it's also kind of I would say a racial equity justice problem as well, because if you think of where landfills are located, they're often in poor communities or in the backyards of poor communities. And so as this food sits and it rots, it produces harmful methane gas, they breathe it in, and then they're the same communities that could need that food that's perfectly good that goes to waste.
Wow.
And so I just think the SDG goals were behind on them for sure. But I also say there's a lot of money spent on the advertisement, but not enough spent on the actual like putting it in practice. Because if you're gonna, if you're gonna buy a Super Bowl commercial, you've spent a lot of money to make this announcement, and so now you have to do the work.
Yeah.
It's like that's a big issue we're seeing.
I like that. So I know that when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to the ESG world, partnerships are a really big part of it. I briefly mentioned your partnership with the NFL. Do you have any really big partnerships that you're excited about, or do you have some companies that are on your target list in order to start your services with them?
Let's go to the target list because I think that's what everybody can help. So we really want to work with big CPG brands. We've figured out now we have a big customer, Beanbo Bakeries. A lot of people haven't heard of that company, but you've heard of the brands that they bake for. So they bake Entenmann's, Thomas Bagels, Sara Lee. Okay. So now we're understanding how much waste is taking place from actually consumer goods, which is different from how we first approached it, where we were going to large-scale enterprises like stadiums and arenas. We did work with the NFL when the Super Bowl was here. And that was our goal, is like prepared foods. But now we're seeing from CPGs that there's so much food that goes to waste from the store side that we're trying to recover as well. So any introduction to CPG companies would be great. We're starting to really dive into large scale franchises, which is something, again, we thought wouldn't make a lot of sense, but it makes sense if you get the entire industry. We're doing a lot in the healthcare space, lots of waste happening in hospitals, and then also colleges and universities. This is a big opportunity too for us. Today I'm really excited because while I'm here, my team is announcing a really big partnership that we're doing with FEMA, Amazon, and Red Cross around, this is a big deal for us. It's something we've been working on for, you could go back on my tweets. I've been saying, I really want to work with the government. We need to be able to do disaster relief, and so Amazon has built their emergency response warehouse in Union City. And so today we're announcing it because not only is it June 1st, it's also the start of hurricane season, and lots of hurricanes hit the Southeast. And so we built a mobile grocery store that now will be able to deploy across the Southeast should a hurricane happen, and we can bring real-time relief right into those communities. So I'm really excited about that. And then lastly, we really want to work with the government. A lot of money, billions and billions of dollars get spent to try and address hunger and food waste, and we want a percentage of that.
I love that. Congratulations on all the partnerships
Thank
as
you.
well. The last question, or the last two questions that I'll ask. So looking ahead, how do you envision the role of technology evolving in the future to inspire behavioral changes and address food waste, sustainability, and hunger?
Yeah, I think the biggest behavioral change that has to happen is from us. You know, even when we do get those partnerships and like one of our college and university campuses, we are trying to get them to zero waste. There is not enough education from the everyday person about food waste. And so I think technology could definitely play a part on that. We've had trash talkers like that go out and stand by the trash cans, that's what we call them, and like tell people like this could be composted, this is recycled, this is landfill. But a lot of times people just will put everything in compost even though it's landfill, and it contaminates it, and then we're not able to compost it. And so there's a lot of education that could be done to tell more people about the effects of food waste. I think that there's tons of opportunity there. You know, you see a lot about like AI and how it's like, I was listening to the Breakfast Club on my way over here, and it was so funny because they were like, I hate AI and it's gonna ruin the world, and you know, it was just like listening to it. But I'm thinking, what are the positives? Like what could come of it? And if there's an opportunity to just even tell people about this, because this is our world, this is our planet. And I have a 2-year-old, a teenager who is like wild, but you know, it's real. Like you know, icebergs are melting. Like this is something that we've really got to pay attention to, because we have one planet, and as much as we could do to think about it. I also want to see more technologies be built to solve these problems. So it's like we're working on food waste, but what about the energy grid? You know, what about even poverty? You know, malnutrition is another big one as well. When you think of zero hunger, 1 in 8 people on this planet are going hungry tonight. And so that's a lot of people. And whatever technology, it's, you know, I always joke, my mom hates when I say this, but like she met her husband online, and I'm like, listen, on tech, on a match.com or whatever. So if we could build technology to meet our spouses, I'm hoping that we could build technology to solve some of these really big problems and challenges that we have. And that's what I think all of you guys could do.
I love that. So we talked about your business. We talked about your growth. I just want to talk to you as a CEO as well. So we do have a lot of people that are here are in the technical world, but a lot of people also are entrepreneurs. I know we already talked about us bringing you in as a partner to help us be more sustainable as well. But let's be real, being sustainable can be expensive. So as a CEO of Goodr, what advice or insights can you share with businesses and individuals looking to leverage technology for sustainability practices? How do you think we should start?
Well, if you are at a company that has food, you know, I think you could start with Goodr, you know, giving us an opportunity. And the thing is, food is everywhere. You know, I remember when SAP is a big customer of ours, and when we were selling to their VP of sustainability, he was like, oh, we're a tech company. I was like, yeah, but you guys have 100,000 employees and all these corporate cafeterias, and you know, you are in the food business. You know, I think one of my friends from Finks always says, like, every company is a payments company. I feel the same way. Like, every company that's serving food is in the food business, and you need to be, you know, cognizant of what's taking place with your food waste. I just would say, so like advice from entrepreneurs, you know, I think the biggest thing that I've been trying to really work on lately is like my mental health and just like my self-care. And I think I did not take that as serious early on in this journey, to where I was like burnt out and I had to have surgery and, you know, just everything. So no matter what you do, no matter what you're building, you know, build yourself up, because you're going to pour so much and you really can't give from an empty cup. So that's my biggest advice that I'm telling people, is just like to take care of you. For me, I have to go to my garden like every day. I don't even care if it's raining, because I like to see things that I've been, you know, nurturing grow. Yeah. And that's like my happy place. And I just go out there and I journal, and I'm really grateful for that. It's a pandemic hobby that I picked up. But you got to do something to take care of yourself, because this is a very cruel, cruel world. All this crazy stuff is happening every day. And no matter if you are an entrepreneur or you are an employee, still take care of yourself. So that's like my advice for everybody.
I love it. We are getting the flashing of the talk. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited. I'm excited for this year, but to continue to grow with you as well. I've always been inspired by your work. As a reminder, we will have our speakers in the Q&A room if you want to have a more intimate conversation with Jasmine Crowe. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.